Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to those of you here in the Zoom room with me, and welcome to all of you on YouTube that are watching this either live or on replay. It's great to have you here today. This is our first webinar of the year of 2026. I know it's been a good 6 weeks or anyway since we've all met together, and I see a number of familiar faces, our usual crew here in the Zoom room with me live. Thanks for joining me. I'll just give you a couple of little updates here. I'm getting indication today, and I see Andrew's in the Zoom room with us today. Andrew Harbridge, our publisher, that the grade 7 book that I've got here is pretty much ready to go to print, and I think we've made an order, and so you should see this going up for sale in the coming days, perhaps as early as next week. Just depends on the printer, I suspect. Andrew, if you've got an update for us, feel free to throw in the chat box what you're seeing on your end. He is saying yes. Feel free to write down, or let's put everyone in the chat box there that's here with me. Go ahead and just stick in the chat where you're calling from today, or where you're in from today. It'd be nice to hear where everyone's from. I'm in Thunder Bay, Ontario, as usual, from my home studio, and it's great to meet with you today and get back at these webinars. I have some more planned here in the coming weeks. It's not going to be regular necessarily. As you've noticed lately, we've been busy doing other things, and I've got a couple of guests lined up. And I'm going to keep playing through grade 7 book after today to go through the classical and the modern selections too. Today we're focusing just on the Baroque music, what I like to call the harpsichord music. Most of the music we hear today is written for harpsichord, and then we adapt it to the piano later on. So we'll talk about that transition and some of the things around how we manage that transition, a lot of which we've talked about in the past for grades 5 and 6. It isn't until grade 6 in our exam system that students have to play a Baroque piece on the exam. And so by grade 7, some students may not have that much experience. If they want to do an exam, they may not have a lot of experience with Baroque music. I know in my studio I try to introduce it early on, but it is a tougher and tougher sell over time. But I still try to find ways to incorporate it so that by the time we get to grade 6, 7, the textures are so interesting and intricate. It requires a certain amount of detail. It requires a certain amount of understanding of a dialect, how to articulate, and I try to instill that in students right from the grade 1, 2 levels, so that if they still like this kind of music by grade 7 and they're doing an exam, that they understand it, and we don't have to start from square one necessarily. Okay, so I'm seeing some of you here calling in from, we have Peterborough, Ottawa, and New Brunswick, and then I see a number of you in from other places here. Thanks for joining me live today, and again, thanks to all of you watching on the replay. I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to chat a little bit about some of the pieces, and then maybe even take a couple of harpsichord runs through a couple of these too, just to compare. I've been playing a lot on my harpsichord sound. I think I mentioned in a previous webinar that I have had chances to acquire a harpsichord at different points, but I always turn it down because they're just too temperamental to maintain. It'd be fun for the first couple of weeks, and then after that you need it tuned all the time. There's keys sticking. I've seen how these things work. They're very difficult to maintain, and most professional harpsichordists will tell you that for every hour of playing time, there's at least a half hour of maintenance that goes into it. So if you're practicing on it 2 hours a day, you're probably maintaining for an hour a day as you go along, if you want it in tip-top condition. I love the digital piano and the fact that I have 2 harpsichords on this that I can play from, and it still feels like a piano. Of course, you don't have to alter the touch like you would on a harpsichord, where the keys are much smaller, the action is so much different. It's just a little bit more reliable, and so I like to play it on harpsichord to see perhaps a little better what the composer might have been thinking in some ways in terms of sound. And then I go back to the piano, and I'm always amazed at the sound difference. It sounds like the piano is literally underwater, and I have to figure out how to re-articulate everything as I try to accommodate it. Okay, so we're going to dive right in here. I'm going to share my screen. We'll get right into the table of contents. Of course, anyone here in the Zoom room live, if you have any questions, throw it in the chat box. I'll be checking the chat box periodically as we go. I'll be altering my microphone. I had to go ahead and reinvent my settings because I lost my sheet that told me what I was doing last year that worked. I felt better by the time we get these up on YouTube, that the sound quality is a little better. You may find overall that the volume input is a little bit low. That's so we don't get so much distortion. Most of us are listening to this on very small computer speakers. I've gotten in the habit of putting a Bluetooth speaker attached to my computer so that when I'm listening to this stuff, whether it's a webinar or a Zoom exam, for example, I can hear much more volume that way. So I would encourage you to do that through these webinars if you're watching on replay or here live. If you can get an external speaker hooked up to your computer the way we used to have to do 20 years ago, you're going to get a much better sound experience, I think. Q&A. Jono, you're noticing that I'm in mono. That is somewhat on purpose, yeah, because what I've got here is I've got a sound module. I can only plug in my instrument to the sound module using mono, and I have an external mic also plugged in, and I'm mixing those two slightly. So you should, and I think the external mic is probably in mono as well. So it's just simply the limitation on my cheap, not a cheap sound module. It's a good sound module, but you'll notice that when you are listening on headphones, you'll see that I'm only coming out of one channel. There's probably a way to fix that. A little bit beyond me at the moment. George, welcome here. George from Time Warp Technologies is here today. I've mentioned Andrew's here, our publisher from Harbridge Wireless. I'll be referring to them from time to time. When it comes to editing, because they did all the engraving for this music and a lot of the editing. I have my say in some of the editing. We've had input from a couple of other people as well, but I appreciate that Andrew and George are here, and you're going to see some of their engravings and some of their editing in the music as well. Okay, so let's get over to, I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll get into the score so you can see it as I go along. I'm just going to blow this up so we can see it. Notes on editing, etc. Here's the table of contents. So this is likely for a lot of you your first look at what's going to be in this book. I'll just hold this up here for a minute. So today we're going through 10 pieces, I believe. Scarlatti, Jeremiah Clark, J.S. Bach, de Gambarini, who is featured in pretty much every book we have now in the Mosaic series to this point. A piece by Zippoli, Telemann, Kuhnau, not Kuhlau, Kuhnau, Elizabeth Turner, George Frederick Handel. And then you can see what we're going to do in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to see if I can learn the classical repertoire within the next 2 to 3 weeks so that we can hear some of these pieces. You won't recognize some of them, I hope, by Matteo Albéniz, George Benda, Beethoven, of course, J.C. Bach, Anna Bonn, Muzio Clementi, and Dussek. And then when you look there at the Romantic and the modern repertoire, that is really interesting. A lot of new pieces there we wouldn't have heard before or have seen published before in traditional conservatory albums, and I look forward to playing through those as quick as I can learn them as well for you. Andrew in the chat box is saying Mosaics is available in Superscore under Conservatory Canada. Yeah, that's something I was going to come to later too. The idea if you want to see this music sooner, there is the Superscore app which you can get from the App Store. Some people have said they have trouble searching for it, and I did a search a couple of weeks ago. I think it's Superscore Music app, or there's some phrase you have to get right in order to see the Superscore app. Anyone can download the Superscore app for free. You just pay for the scores as you want them, or the books as you want them within the app, which are very similar to retail cost. The benefit of that is you're going to have all the wonderful backing tracks or recordings that Andrew and various others have made for every song in these books, and they are embedded in behind the score so that you can play the music, you can see where you are in the music with a green line, and you can hear the recording. So it's a great way to hear these as well. And so I'd encourage some of you to check those out, and we're going to have George back on to talk about the Superscore app. I'm sure we're almost due for one of those webinars from him. So George says Superscore or Superscore Music in the app for the iPad, free download. I know just Superscore itself doesn't give me the right one, but I think Superscore Music is what I've noticed gives me the reliable result there. Okay. Just gonna check out. Let's keep everything in the chat box today. Q&A is going to be a little harder for me to follow, but I'll come back to that chat because I know most of you are pretty quiet when it comes to the chat box, and that's okay. So we're going to start today with Scarlatti, Sonata in A major. I'll put this up here, the first page anyway. This is a 3-page piece, the way that we've engraved this, in A major. One of the neat features of this one, it introduces students, I think, to Scarlatti in a pretty easy way. The left hand's almost exclusively half notes all the way through. And there's just this idea that the same couple of ideas keep going round and round. I know I have a few students, they just love things that go round and round. Take a couple of ideas and repeat them ad nauseum. That's this piece. It may seem a little bit long for grade 7 even still, but I think it works quite well, and once they learn the first page, they've got the patterns for the whole thing. In terms of the trills there, these are, you can start on the note above, you can start on the note on the beat, and then we've got appoggiatures as well, which we've notated without slashes, and you'll hear how I'm doing those. I'm just simply doing them as 2 even 8th notes within those beats where those are indicated. So let's start with this. And then feel free, again, questions anytime. I'm going to try and take a moderate tempo here and just using my piano sound for now. So I'm just going to adjust a little bit the screen. Little mic adjustment. So my speaking voice will be a little quieter, but I will bump it up when I'm talking. But this is just for the recording, so you can hear it a little bit better. That's a fun one to play. Not too difficult, I don't think. You know, there's not a lot of complexity to the left hand like we get in some of the other pieces, but the right hand has to jump around a lot in these jagged kind of ways, manage those appoggiatures, which is a great way for students to learn how to execute those, and then of course the trills. Oh, in the chat box, yeah, Corinne is saying, you've got the app and just purchased level 7. Love the format. Hey, that's great to hear. Glad someone's using that already. So there's page 2. I get all the Scarlatti's sonatas, you know, some 555 of them. Each of them is in binary form. And on the exam, we wouldn't want to hear the repeat on this by any means. It's just too long. But it's got a lot of length and a lot for students to dig into there without being too terribly difficult, I think. You know, almost in this pre-classic format, but we do stick it in Baroque with Conservatory Canada. Most of Scarlatti's music we have in the Baroque period. In fact, all of it, when it does come up. Second piece, a jig in A major. This is by Jeremiah Clark. I hadn't seen this piece before. It's interesting in 6/8 time, which we tend to favor a lot in the Mosaic series. We have a lot of pieces in 6/8 time. And the left-hand imitation is really very typical of the Baroque period. We've got the right hand stating some kind of subject or motif, and the left hand imitating it in a slightly different key a couple of bars later. And so I'm trying to balance in this one between my right hand and left hand a little bit, so that on the piano we have to adjust a bit. If I play it on harpsichord, everything just stands out and sounds so brilliant. You can hear everything clearly. On the piano, especially, that left hand gets lost so easily. So I'm working pretty hard to try and get that left hand sound out there. In the second half, the left hand almost simplifies a little bit and goes into these broken octaves, almost like a musette kind of texture, just to highlight the dance. And I just have fun with those. I let my left hand retreat into the background on those sections there. So I hope you enjoy this one. This is just one page. one place there toward the end, you can see there are these 16th note, almost like trills with a little turn at the end written out, and then near the end in bar 34, in that last line, there's a trill written there. I'm just trying to copy the exact same format for what I'm hearing in those 16th notes. It may have just been a shortcut by the composer at that point. I wouldn't play just a 4-note trill when it doesn't really match everything else that's gone on prior to it. Okay, going on to our third piece then. This is the Prelude by Bach. Prelude in F. We have one piece here by Bach. This one has a nice improvisatory feel. Most of the preludes at the time were in this sort of improvised kind of style, and Bach often admitted to, just starting out each day on the organ, his favorite instrument, playing along and improvising things, and we get this very typical 1-4-5-1 cadence at the very beginning in the chords, and then left hand imitates right away. So again, I'm trying to bring out the right hand at the beginning. It's almost impossible not to. And then I'm trying to highlight the left hand a little bit more in bars 3 and 4. And then once I get to bar 5, I try to train students in long lines like this. You get this long cello line walking up like that. I try to get students to track that a little bit more with their ear so that they're shaping that. And that sort of drives the harmony a little bit. The combination of all the detail in the two hands together, creating this dynamic swell that can go over 3 or 4 bars here at that point. Same thing when we get toward the end there. I'm just allowing these right hand broken chords to kind of shimmer along, combining with the left hand in a semi-detached kind of way to create a block of chords, and hearing one chord, how it progresses to the next. Does the harmonic rhythm allow the dynamics to swell and get a little bit louder or a little bit softer with each subsequent chord? That's sort of how I'm conceiving it dynamically. You can see in these editions in Mosaics, we're not adding any dynamics. Of course, the fingering is there. We're trying to make it as real as possible so that students understand that this is an improvisatory kind of feel. On the harpsichord, we didn't really have dynamics, but when it comes to the piano, we need to do something to temper and add interest. Otherwise, the piano just gets really, really flat and kind of a little bit too muted and a little too bland. So I'm going to try and spice this up as best I can. I hope you enjoy this one. This is BWV 927. So that's just my take on it. Maybe a disclaimer. I meant to say this at the beginning. I don't have time to perfect all these pieces and play them absolutely perfectly. So don't take them too seriously in terms of students have to play it this way to get a 90 or 100 on an exam. It's not that at all. I have time to read through and just sharpen my reading abilities so that I can play them for you so you can hear the music we're doing and we can talk about them somewhat intelligently. I'm also messing around a little bit with my keyboard sounds, or my piano sounds on my digital piano. I started in the last couple of weeks realizing that I have 3 or 4 different pianos, and I'm playing each one trying to decide whether I like the softer, more muted hammers a little better, or whether it needs a more brighter touch. This one here, I went back to my brighter sound, but the previous piece I played, I used a more muted hammered sound. So I'll let you know how that's going and why I'm making those decisions as I go. Andrew has to leave. Yeah, thanks for checking in, Andrew. Nice to have you here in the room. And thanks for all you do there with the publishing. It's been really great. I can't say enough about Harvard's Wireless and their ability to put this Mosaic series together. Andrew and George, who's also here, have started working on engraving a grade 8 already. And so hopefully we'll get that out at some point, but we can't promise a timeline on that. It's just such a huge job with the length of the pieces and the number of pieces that we want to include that album. It's going to be very similar to grade 7, if not a little bit more. Okay, next piece, Carillon. This is Elisabetta de Gambarini, and we include pretty much at least one of her pieces in every one of the books so far. She's really helped us in terms of bringing out all this wonderful Baroque keyboard music. And when we're trying to, in Mosaics, look for new pieces, a little bit off the beaten path that haven't been published before. And she's just provided us a wealth of music here that great musicologists have found and have started publishing. and George and Andrew go back to the sources. This one's published by Time Warp, so it's already in the Superscore catalog, so George has done all the editing here, and they've done a fabulous job at sourcing these and going back to the source documents to give us a realistic, as realistic an Urtext manuscript as possible. Again, no dynamics, some great fingering suggestions, some trill suggestions. You'll see the Apoggios tours there that I'm going to try and highlight. I think let's do a little experiment on this one because we have time today. I'm going to play it on harpsichord first, and then I'm going to go back and switch to a muted piano I think I'm going to use on this one. And we'll just see what the difference is like. And you can ask me any questions if you have them. I'm trying to really bring out the left-hand tunes in this. This is really nice contrapuntal writing where the left hand is quite florid and has lots of expression. So I'm trying to do that. When I play with the harpsichord, I'm not going to be doing that. I'll be doing things a little bit differently because I don't have dynamic control, even on the digital harpsichord. I'm going to be using maybe a little delay tactics, but I'm more reveling just in the trills and the decoration and the ornamentation and how wonderful the 16th notes sound. And then when I switch to the piano, it's a different mode. I'm going to have to really use my hands to adjust as I go in tempering the sound. So maybe the first time I'll keep page 1 up, and the second time I'll show you page 2 perhaps when I play it the second time on the piano. And now over to the piano sound to compare. So I'd be curious to see what you think and what you could hear. And if you're in the Zoom room and that harpsichord doesn't sound very good, let me know. So George is saying in the Superscore edition there is both harpsichord and piano playback for the Baroque pieces, and he has some fantastic, wonderful sounds in his tone bank there that he uses for all sorts of different instruments. So yeah, that would be really cool to hear. I'm going to go back and do that. So you can see, to me, as soon as I switch out of harpsichord and come into piano, it sounds very muted and like I feel like it's underwater, and I have to push a lot more to get to hear what I really want to hear. This piece is probably not everyone's cup of tea, for some students, especially learning it. It's a little bit abstract. The ideas are quite ornate, but it's a really good idea, for those Baroque geeks out there that like to geek out on the style and what it can do. And I think it can be even more flexible with the tempo. I find today I'm just a little bit too driven with it. I'm not breathing as much as I would want to. I think it could be a little bit more relaxed. And so I would encourage students to explore that over time. Hey, I knew this was going to come up, Kim. That's a great question. Are students able to use the harpsichord sound on an exam? I've been thinking about this because I knew someone was going to ask it, and I thought of it in the middle of playing this. I don't think it's a good idea, simply because, I mean, it shows off something, but these are piano exams, and the harpsichord is a totally different instrument without dynamics, and so I think we should just stick with the piano sounds. That's my feeling this past couple weeks, and I've thought about it many times. We would have some examiners would hear it and oh, well, that's cool, that's nice that they did that, but they're going to be a little bit limited in their assessment because the piano is all about controlling sound and tone and balance between the hands, and on most harpsichord sounds that's going to go out the window. So I would encourage students to practice with it, and I do that with my students, but when it comes to the exam we should probably stick to the piano sounds for that reason. It's not absolutely crucial, but I just think it's a good idea to adhere to that for now. Hey, I'm just going back to the Q&A because I see Jono's got some questions there. Would pedal be appropriate for the prelude in F? I like questions about pedal these days, especially in Baroque music. I think it would be hard. My foot's always on the pedal. I'm always dabbing a little bit, but in a piece like the prelude in F, the Bach piece that I played a little bit ago, any kind of pedal is going to obscure those 16ths very quickly, and so I don't want that. I want to preserve that incisive attack with transparent articulation that's so very much a part of Baroque music. As soon as we put the pedal down, we're going to get something that's obscuring the texture, and we're not going to hear the detail. Baroque to me is all about flamboyance, expressiveness. It's full of adjectives, and as soon as we start adding resonance, we're going to obscure those. And there's certain pieces that might work, like the very first prelude and fugue in C major, that opening prelude. That one, to me, can use a little bit of resonance from the piano. It's more about harmonic rhythm and chords. This particular prelude in F in the grade 7 book, it's about chords and harmonic rhythm, but it's also about this intricate detail that we would lose pretty quickly. So I'm dabbing with my pedal all the time, but not in a way anyone would know, and it's just mainly to add a bit of color to long notes, perhaps, or maybe to connect something that I'm not able to connect, or I'm too lazy to connect because I'm reading. That's one little crutch I might use. Okay, so that's Jono's question here from the Q&A. So if you do use the Q&A, I do see it. I'm just going to be a little slower on that, that's all. So that's the carillon. I forgot to put up the second page there so you could see that the second time through. My apologies, but it's a lot of the same. Again, not everyone's cup of tea, but this is a great one for the Baroque geeks, and I know some of you love to do this kind of thing with your students. Gavotte by Zipoli. I struggle a little bit at times to hear the gavotte in this, although it's coming. Usually you get more of an upbeat, and there is an upbeat on beats 2 and 3, but a really clear up, up, down feeling, up, up, down. It is kind of there, and there is this longer phrase that incorporates like a lot of gavottes. It's just a little bit different than some gavottes, and that's okay. I think I'm going to play this on my more muted piano today. Let me just check. Yeah, I'm going to play this on my softer voiced piano and see what you think. Of course, like any of these, this one just sounds dynamite on harpsichord too. Everything just kind of sparkles and gets pulled out. Here's a look at what the second page looks like. Very similar to the first one. I highlighted something really neat when I was analyzing this. Baroque composers sometimes, I don't think this is necessarily led by Bach, but they do a long chain of 5 of 5, where you get a chord which functions as the dominant of the next chord, which functions as the dominant of the next chord. And so each chord falls in this long sequence of fifths, a long circle of fifths. We look at bar 32, the top right corner of the screen there, there's a B7 or a B major chord going to E minor. That starts a really long chain of a B chord falling a fifth to an E chord, falling a fifth to an A chord, falling to a D chord in bar 34, falling to a G chord in the next bar, following to a C chord, but it's made C sharp, following to another fifth to an F sharp, which acts as the final dominant of our home key B minor in bar 38. And then we get a more regular 1-4-5-1 pattern for the finish. But that's a long 8-bar sequence of 5 of 5 of 5 of 5 of 5, which is really cool for students to understand both theoretically and also how to treat that in their playing, and how it can lead a dynamic choice all the way through, and feel this long pull of how phrasing is built and put together in Baroque music. We've got these nice quotes here that Andrew, our publisher, has put throughout the music. This quote by Marie Jael, one of the female composers that we've been featuring in the series. "My art, which is a science, has come to life as the full flowering of all the struggles of my past life." Next piece by Telemann. This one may be more familiar from his Fantasias. D major, very detailed. This is very ornate and tricky, and I really struggle with this one at times to really make sure my hands are balanced in a way. I also struggle with, what do I want to hear? And we often hear these jagged alternating patterns in one of the hands in Baroque music where you get a fixed D, let's see, at the beginning in the first two measures. The right hand has a D up high and the bottom note moves. This is a counterpoint within a single line. And so I'm teaching students how to play that lower note louder and trying to hide the repetitive D. A lot of times in these kind of alternating figures, you hear students treating each note equally, and I think if they can learn how to emphasize the bottom note, they'll start to hear the tunes as they're presented between the two hands with just a single note up top sounding like a different instrument. So I'm trying to highlight that. The triplets, when they come in, I find quite death-defying because I usually get this going a little too quick. Fun to play this on harpsichord as well. I'm just going to play it on piano today, and I think I've chosen to play this on my regular bright piano just to get some of that detail out there so I don't lose any of that incisive attack. Very tricky. That figure from the very beginning we see later on in the left hand, and again I'm trying to bring out the lower notes there instead of the upper notes, and I'm still struggling to try and hear my left hand when I'm playing that. I find the right hand eighth notes when the left hand has the action. My right hand just feels a little bit too prominent, I feel. So some of the struggles there in the piano and trying to figure out exactly how to make it work, really difficult at times when we're trying to take harpsichord music and apply it to the piano. I think this one just in my hands needs another month just to sort of mature and age a little bit. And then I'll have some easier choices when it comes to managing that resonance and texture. Okay, a little different style here by Johann Kuhnau. Kuhnau's not known for a lot when it comes to keyboard music or as a composer in general. His most famous work seems to be these biblical sonatas that he published some time ago in the late 1600s, I believe. And this is the first movement of that from his, or sorry, the Victory Dance and Festival from Biblical Sonatas. This is the number one, the first movement, called David and Goliath, and I found a more expanded title somewhere, The Fight Between David and Goliath. And of course we know that story where David overcomes Goliath, and so the struggle in this case sounds a little bit happy. But it's kind of nice because there's just some nice chords here. It's not always so running and linear counterpoint. There's some nice choral structure, double thirds for students to work on, and I try to work to get that in the arm more than the fingers. Some easy trills to execute, but kind of fun, very simple harmonic language. Fun just to try and portray the battle here and the struggle a little bit, and you can have a little bit of fun with this as long as you keep it in a more detached kind of style. Don't get too legato with it. Very ceremonial, almost sounds like something Handel would have written, perhaps, and maybe even for organ. It sounds almost a little bit churchy in a way. Really neat piece though, a nice contrast to some of the other pieces that we typically get in the Baroque section of these conservatory albums. There's the second page there. And then Elizabeth Turner, another more, unknown composer over history, wrote a lot of music. We featured quite a bit actually in the Mosaic series here. It's a very difficult gigue. Well, maybe it's not that difficult, but there's these running triplets that are really hard to manage. I think for students, they're going to want to rush through this. I know I do, and when I do, there are times when it just sounds really neat, whether it's on the harpsichord or even on a softer piano. With the triplets, if you get them just right, and you can focus on this nice melody in the right hand and joining and phrasing it into long phrases, the whole thing just shimmers after time. There's a look at the second page. I'll just leave the first page up there for now so you can follow along. And actually, I think this is the other one. I'm going to start with harpsichord again, just so we can compare. I'll play the harpsichord version first, and then I'm using my more muted piano on this one for the second time through. And again, I'm curious to know your thoughts, those of you here in the Zoom room, what you're hearing and the difference between them. Onto piano. I'm actually using my brighter piano, sorry, here, not the muted piano. it just feels like I have a much easier time expressing the lines on a piano. I really feel with that comparison, the piano's an improvement. The harpsichord sounds neat, you get all this wonderful detail, more about dancing, but I find it very difficult not being able to express the same way, where everything is a little bit more bland and just straightforward, and it becomes more rhythmically interesting than it is shaped. Yeah, Jonah, you're saying the same thing in the chat box. I like that there's a more legato, flowing feel when you use the piano. Yeah, that's what I was feeling there too. To send light into the darkness of men's hearts, such is the duty of an artist, Robert Schumann. I believe that appears in one of our other Mosaics books as well, that quote. Okay, and the last piece here today, Allemande by Handel. Really lovely lyrical piece. It looks like a lot of detail at first. We've crammed this one all nicely into one page, so it's a bit more compact. But I'm going to try and hold back a little bit. The Allemande is probably the most lyrical dance we have, and I've been struggling. I've been trying to research again. I do this from time to time, trying to figure out what is the Allemande really. So a more processional kind of dance in couples, often couples chained, and intricate footwork, but nothing too fast. It kind of flows gently, and it's meant to be done in larger groups, in couples around the room. And so the ideas are very lyrical here. There's a lot of these alternating patterns where you'll get a static note on the thumb and the top note is changing, and so I'm trying to highlight and phrase or inflect that top note while keeping the left hand thumb static and just in the background. The left hand is more of a cello roll here, but there are a couple of places where the left hand pops out of the texture, and again I'm trying to highlight the top note of that one because the left hand bottom note is the one that's static in those textures. And then the last four measures are just wonderful, the way that it culminates with this beautiful lyrical running 16th notes in the right hand sound really nice, and a layered left hand between the cello and the viola, let's say, between those two voices that are being held. Reminds me a lot of an Allemande from Bach's French Suite in E flat major, actually, which is a really nice piece to check out, a nice comparable to this one. And I'm just using piano for this one. So quite harmonious. I'm doing a lot of hyper legato with my hands. I'm holding notes longer than indicated, especially in some of those 16th note places. I'm holding that top 16th note that I'm trying to bring out for at least at least double that length from time to time. The pedals getting dabbed in here and there, but I'm trying to do a lot of it with my hands, almost like organ playing, to join those notes all together and get this really overlapped kind of sound. Okay, so that's it for the Baroque repertoire, everyone. Thanks, for taking this in and for listening, and I hope you find the music interesting. I'm sure some of the pieces are somewhat familiar. Virtually none of them have been published by Conservatory Canada or Western Ontario Conservatory Music in the last few decades, but most of them I don't think have been published at all, or very often in conservatory albums. So I hope you enjoy the variety. I hope you can find students and convince them to play this music still. We realize a lot of students don't get to this level anymore these days, it seems, and a lot of students, there are teachers that still believe in skipping the grade 7 level altogether. I think that's quite dangerous, pushing them into grade 8 from grade 6 to try and finish things off by high school and get that grade 8 certificate. It's a very difficult task. And so we hope you take time with your students to do grade 7. I think there's a lot of really great repertoire here. If anyone has any questions, or just comments, feedback. It'd be nice to know what you think of the Baroque music here. And again, I look forward to playing the classical music with you soon. And so maybe what we'll do here is we'll stop our YouTube stream there. Those of you on YouTube, keep your eyes on your inboxes for more to come, or follow the CCTV YouTube channel, and you'll see more webinars from there. I'm just going to try and stop share.